Good afternoon, everyone. We are the group 4 and we will discuss to you our topic, which is African literature and Asian literature. So before we start, may I present first our table of contents, which is Philippine literature, to be followed by introduction. Next is A World of Challenge by Johnny Antillon, The Visitation of the Gods by Hilda Cordero Fernando, and Through the Ages and Ages Eternal by C. Pidoche. Okay, so first we will go to Philippine literature. What comes in your mind when we say Philippine literature, or why do we need to study Philippine literature? So literature is a word derived from the Latin word which means litera, which means letter. It is defined as a piece of printed work related to the ideas and feelings of the people that may be true or just a product of writer's imagination. Philippine literature is a literature associated with the Philippines from prehistory through its colonial legacies and on to the present. Pre-Hispanic literature, Philippine literature was actually epics passed on from generation to generation, originally through an oral tradition. So the Philippine literature is rich, depicting the diversity of Filipino culture dating back from pre-colonial era and the present. So why do we need to study the Philippine literature? We can enumerate many reasons for studying literature. Here are but a few. We study literature so that we can better appreciate our literary heritage. We cannot appreciate something that we do not understand. Through a study of our literature, we can trace the rich heritage of ideas handed down to us from our forefathers. Then we can understand ourselves better and take pride in being a Filipino. So that is a short description of the Philippine literature. Next is the early stages of Filipino literature. There is a pre-Spanish period, the Spanish period, and the propaganda and revolutionary periods. We will go to the pre-Spanish period. Pre-Spanish period or literature was in an oral form as technology of printing wasn't available yet. Works such as an epics, legends, folklore, salawikain, bugtong, sawikain, songs such as Oyayi or Hele are passed on from generations to generations. So, from pre-Spanish period, wasn't a printing yet, but it is from oral form or the way we speak. From the Spanish period, Philippine literature changed during the Spanish period. It was centered on Christian faith. The works during this time are imitative of the Spanish theme, forms, and traditions. The corrido, awit, dalit, sinakulo, moro-moro, doplo, and karagatan. And zarzuela are reflective of the said characteristics. So the Spanish periods are already given explanatory description. So it was centered on Christian faith of every Filipino. Next is the propaganda and revolutionary periods. The propaganda movement was reformatory in objective, and its members are college students mostly based in Spain. The primary propagandists were Jose Rizal, Marcelo H. de Pilar, and Graciano Lopez Zaina. The exposure of the evils of the Spanish rule in the Philippines was because of Rizal's Noli Me Tangere and El Filibusterismo, and has paved the way to a revolution against Spain. Del Pilar's essays and editorials in Diaring Tagalog, which he founded with Lopez Zaina's articles in La Solidaridad, which he was an editor, reflected nationalism that was dominant by this time. So the revolutionary movement took over as the propagandists failed to get much reforms. This was, of course, more violent, and it demands complete independence from Spain. So the Katipunan was founded by Andres Bonifacio, and who was inspired by Rizal's novels. The articles written in Tagalog, which was a form of revolution, was published in the Kalayaan, the newspaper of the society. The literature at that time was more propagandic than literary, as the situation and events that time needed such purpose of for liberation. So, why do we need to study the Philippine literature again? So, as I discussed, we Filipino must have known or must should have a knowledge about our Philippine literature. Okay, for the best books in Philippine literature. Noli Me Tangere by Dr. Jose Rizal, Florante at Laura by Francisco Balagtas, and Mga Ibong Mandaragit by Amando V. Hernandez. So here are the best books in the Philippine literature. For our introduction, so here is our topic, which is what is Asian literature and African literature. So see yourself, what is for you? What is an Asian literature and African literature? So, Asian literature and African literature. What is an Afro-Asian literature? Afro is derived from the term Afro-American. So, Afro-Asian or Afro, it is used to a person or the person in that place. So, Afro-Asian literature refers to the literary output of the various countries and cultures in Africa and Asia. This includes their oral traditions and from the first to the contemporary written and or published prose and poetry. Asian literature alone is diverse and vibrant. So we will go to the Africa or the African literature. It is the second largest continent after Asia, covering about 1/5 of the total land surface of Earth. The continent is bounded on the west by the Atlantic Ocean, on the north by the Mediterranean Sea, on the east by the Red Sea and the Indian Ocean, and on the south by the mingling waters of the Atlantic and Indian Oceans. For the etymology, the name Africa came into Western use through the Romans, who used the name Africa Terra or land of the Afri, or plural, or Afer singular. For the northern part of the continent as the province of Africa with its capital Carthage, corresponding to modern day of Tunisia. Okay, so we will proceed of what is the history of African literature. African literature has origins dating back thousands of years to ancient Egypt and hieroglyphs. So, Asian literature was given through the ancient African literature, or writing which uses pictures to present words. So, from writing, they actually uses the pictures to present words. Sub-Saharan Africa developed a written literature during the 19th and early 20th century. So, sa Sub-Saharan Africa was developed during the 19th and 20th centuries. So, what is an African novel? So, African novel defies easy genre boundaries. It is, in short, more epic, more political, more didactic, and more connected to its literary antecedents than the Western novel. In genre theory, how does one classify a fiction text that tells a story of love? So, in 1911, Joseph Ephraim Casley Hayford, also known as Ekra Agiman of the Gold Coast or now Ghana, published what is probably the first African novel written in English, Ethiopia Unbound, or Studies in Race Emancipation. So, in 1911, Joseph Hayford, or known as Ekra Agiman, published the first African novel. So, that is the African novel. So, there is also the norms and culture of Africa, which is sense of community, sense of good human relations, and sense of hospitality. Some of them or few of them are norms and cultures from the African people. Next is, what are the major themes in African literature? Themes of colonialism, liberation, nationalism, tradition, displacement, and ruthlessness in African literature. Okay, so we will proceed to the Asian. Asia is bounded by the Arctic Ocean to the north, the Pacific Ocean to the east, the Indian Ocean to the south, the Red Sea, as well as the inland seas of the Atlantic Ocean, the Mediterranean and the Black. To the southwest, the Europe to the west. For the etymology of Asia, the word Asia is originated from the ancient Greek word Iowa, first attributed to Herodotus about 440 BCE. In reference of Anatolia or to the Persian Empire, in contrast to the Greece and Egypt, it originally was a name for the east bank of the Aegean Sea, an area known to the Hittites as Assuwa. Okay, so there is also the norms and culture of Asia. There is a family and education, reserve, conformity and harmony, benevolence and obligation, loss of faith, shame and honor. So these are the norms and culture of Asia. I gave it short description because some of my classmates or members will discuss about the African and Asian literature, to be followed by the next report and so on and so forth. You will understand what is our topic and what will be about the Asian and African literature. So thank you so much. I will give the honor to the next reporter who will discuss the award of challenge.
Thank you so much, Ms. Limin. Now let's proceed to A World of Challenge by Johnny Antillon. Before I start, I have here some questions. Number 1, when you hear the word world, what comes in your mind? And number 2, what is your preferred world which you want to live? Now let's proceed to Johnny Antillon's biography, or here are some information about Johnny Antillon. His full name was Juan Johnny Blanco Antillon. He was an orphan to a Cuban father who died from the World War II. He was born on the year 1936 and died on the year 2010. To sustain his studies, he sold fish door to door, traveling on foot back and forth between Cavite and Manila. He graduated from the University of the Philippines, Diliman, and went on to pursue law but didn't finish. Why Johnny's words transcend generations? As a representative of the Philippines, Antillon spoke candidly of his third world nation struggles post-war that he denounced for its uselessness. So nga ako nung nag-step up sa mga tao ang ginhambal ni Johnny Antillon, or paano bala naka-influence ini sa aton nga generation. Now let's proceed to his speech. Usually when I discuss with people the kind of world we want, they astonish me by describing a utopia without cares. As for me, I like this world we have. I like living in this century so full of strivings and plan that I feel deeply that I am part of a wonderful and exciting experiment. So, when Johnny Antillon say when he wants kuno para sa iya ang gusto yang world nga dream world, ang mga tao kuno ga-astonish nga gina-describe ang ilang gusto nga world is that araang pahapos lang, is that araang ang wala sang war, wala sang peace lang gid kuno ang tanan ang gusto sa mga tao. Pero para kay Johnny Antillon ang world nga gusto ya is ang may ara sang may ara sa mga pagsubok or mga problema. I like the suspense that gives to life its only true zest. Let me have this world with dreams for me to dream and problems for me to solve. If I had lived before the ANH bombs, I might be less optimistic of the future. So kung nabata ko no si Johnny Antillon before sang World War II, maybe he might be less optimistic of the future. But today, I have great hope that I shall enjoy peace, for I feel deeply that no nation will start a war that none can survive. I believe that this world we have deserves a vote of confidence. When, with its dirt and cleanness, its ups and downs, and its total unexpectedness. It has given true variety, more pleasure than pain. Whatever else it may be, this particular century is still the broadest, the most exciting, the most promising of all. May this world always be as challenging as it is. May it always have something to solve, patch, or mend. But above all, may this world will never be a soft place for soft people with soft heads. For I want a world where a man, by facing his troubles, can prove his manhood. With a world of such challenge and scope, our lives will never be complacent, but they will certainly be worth living. Okay, so let's compare the World War II and the situation we are facing today, which is the COVID-19. It's kinda the same nga ang tao sang una during World War II and now is gas struggle. So gusto ipahiwatig or ipaabot sa ato ni Johnny Antillon nga ang kabuhi ta or ang life ta is hindi lang full sang hindi lang pahapos kundi kinahanglan naton nga we need to fight back para sa aton nga rights. Kinahanglan ta magbangon, kinahanglan ta magbato, hindi nga may problema ta nga or hindi lang kay kung may problema tang harapon suko dayon. We need to be strong. Kinahanglan naton batuan ang mga problema. Hindi kita dapat give up. Sa ginhambal ni Johnny Antillon nga, but above all, may this world never be a soft place for soft people with soft heads. For I want a world where a man, by facing his troubles, can prove his manhood. So subong at during sang World War II, kuno kinanglan nila mag-strive, kinanglan nila makipagbato, kinanglan nila i-save ang ilang life, kinanglan nila i-save ang ilang nga pamilya. Parehas man subong kinanglan naton nga sundon ang mga health protocols. Hindi lang kita magpabaya sa aton nga kaugalingon, hindi kita magpabaya sa aton nga pamilya. Kinanglan naton nga isundon ang mga protocols. If we follow the rules nga ginhatag sang government or ginapatupad nila, ang aton nga life is worth for living, just like sa World War II. Kung nakipag-war ka kag just for example man nasawi or na pwede ka ang imo nga at least ang imo nga kabuhi may baylo or ang kabuhi nga ang life mo samtang gatiner ka sa earth is worth it or worth for living. Okay, so to present to you the Visitation of the Gods by Hilda Cordero Fernando. Here are Miss Cristina A. Pernato and Rosella Ismani.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Group 3 reporter. And now, we are Group 4 reporter. We report about Asian and African literature. We report about the Renaissance period. Now, I continue my part entitled The Visitation of the Gods. by Hilda Cordero Fernando. Hilda Cordero Fernando was a famous literature entitled The Visitation of the Gods. It is in this literature where one could see how man would prepare when he will be visited by the gods. One could see how Filipinos would prepare for the coming visitors, especially those coming from the other parts of the world. This week, we have seen a lot of visitors in our city. May maabot kuno sa aton nga lugar alin sa iban nga pungsod. Kita nga daan nga Pilipino, very hospitable people. Ginapreparahan tagid ang pag-abot sa mga bisita, lalo na sa alin sa iban nga pungsod. Okay. Hilda Cordero Fernando is a multi-awarded writer, publisher, and cultural icon from the Philippines. She was born in Manila, has a BA from the St. Teresa's College, Manila, and an MA from Ateneo de Manila University. Hilda Cordero Fernando was born June 4, 1932. Stories about Hilda, the butcher. She also a baker and candlestick maker in 1962, and Wilderness of Sweet 1973. These books have been compiled and reissued later as a story collection, 1994. Another book, Philippine Food and Life, was published in 1992. And last, including the following books, Street of the Manila, 1997, Turn Century, 1978, Philippine Ancestral House, 1980, Being a Filipino, 1981, The History of the Burgess, 1987, Folk Architecture, 1989, and last, The Soul Book, 1991. Next, together with Alfredo Roses, Cordero Fernando work on Filipino heritage, 10 volumes study on Philippine history and culture published by Lahing Filipino in 1978. Afterwards, she founded GCF Books, which published a dozen titles that deal with various aspects of Filipino culture and society. And Cordero Fernando has also worn numerous other hats as a visual artist, fashion designer, playwright, art curator, and producer. In February 2000, she produced a hugely successful extravaganza entitled Luna, an Aswang Romance. And here's literacy expression of Hilda Cordero Fernando that she said, education is not so much a matter of brains as getting along with one's fellow men. And last is sitting, titled Pugadlawin High School. Had made a capital of its photography rooted on the firm ledge of a hill. The schoolhouse was accessible by a series of steps carved on the hard face of the rocks. High-waist windows looked out on the misty grandeur of mountain chain like a sleeping woman. Okay, thank you. Hasta na lang diri ang akong report. I will give in to Rosella on the next slide.
Good morning, everyone. First, plot. The letter announcing the visitation had been delivered in the morning by a sleepy janitor to the principal. The party was. The attached circular revealed a hurried glance. Now volcanic eruptions and other acts of God will be upon Pugadlawin by afternoon. In a literary work, film, or other narrative, the plot is the sequence of events where each affect the next one through the principle or cause and effect. The casual event of a plot can be thought of as a series of events like by the simple, such as in a traditional ballad. Next, conflict. The visitation turns out well. Everything was perfect. Then came the conversation between the new English supervisor, which is Mr. Sawet and Mr. Noel. The English instructor, their conversation is about the evaluation. Mr. Sawet asked Mr. Noel about care observation in the evaluation. Frankly, Miss Noel told Mr. Sawet that the evaluation was phrased and funny because it was like scripted. The visitation was announced a month before the activity. And because of that, school administrators have been opportunity to hide the school imperfections. Of course, the result of the assessment were far from what's happening in the institution every day. The whole activity focused on making an impression and satisfying a group of assessors, who are treated like gods by flattering and gift-giving. In a competitive or opposing action of incompatibles, antagonistic state or action, as of divergent ideas, interest, or person, the opposite of person or forces that gave rise to the dramatic action in a drama or fiction. Next, discuss. The short story is about the reality of the process of death of Filipino idealism in the administration of public school. It shows the difficulties of sustaining one's interest and motivation in improving the standard of education in the country. The story also exposes the Filipino mentality towards competition. Sometimes one's pursuit for personal and professional growth can be mistaken a threat to another man's job or authority. More likely, it would be interpreted as showing off. Unfortunately, the conflict between different interests not only affect those involved, but usually extend to all the faculty, which in turn causes polarization in the workplace. The other meaning of discuss means to have a conversation about or talk about a particular topic, especially to examine it more closely, debate it, or figure out a solution. Next, rising action. The teaching staff and the students were divided into 4 groups. The first group, composed of Mr. De Vinegacia, the harassed home economics instructor, they were appointed to create a menu for supper. The second group was assigned the procedure biddings and the dishes to be used in the supper. And also, the third group was the structure the room. And the raid-based fisherman group composed the fourth and discriminated group under the stewardship of Mrs. Noel. Other meaning of rising action. The rising action starts right after the period of exposition and ends at the climax, beginning with the indicating incident. Rising action is the block of the plot. It is composed of a series of events that brought on the conflict and increased the tension, sending the story rising to a dramatic climax. Next. Climax. The visitation turns out well, but then, when the night came, Mr. Sawet, the new English supervisor, asked Miss Noel about the evaluation, and as an answer, Miss Noel frankly told Mr. Sawet that the evaluation were phrased and funny because it's like scripted. It was announced a month before the visitation date, so the administrators had a chance to prepare and hide infirmities or respective schools. The results are usually far beyond the true status or situations of school because only good and best qualities are highlighted and but or worse things are hidden. For Miss Noel, the whole activity was to make an impression and satisfying a group of assessors who are treated like gods by flattery and gift-giving. The meaning or other meaning of climax. The climax or turning point of a narrative work is it is point or highest tension and drama, or it is the time when the action starts during which the solution is given. The climax of a story is a literary element. Next, falling action. Miss Noel realized that those who sacrificed and dedicated their life for their responsibility or job for the good of the country usually end up getting nothing and having nothing. It seems that all the years that she under Pugad Lawin, she have been a slave of our administration. And in the end, it's always the children who will suffer. As she looked to the eyes of Leon, who is very willing to become a lawyer someday. The meaning of falling action is what happens near in the end of a story after the climax and resolution of the major conflict. Simply, but falling action is what the character are doing after the story's most dramatic part has happened. And last, resolution. At the end of the story, Miss Noel's determination to teach students is still in her heart. And so after breakfast the next morning, the supervisor packed their belongings and were soon ready. Mr. Buenaflor fitted the camera and they all posed on the sunny step for a souvenir photo. The superintendent with Mr. and Miss Albes on either side of him and the minor gods the descending order on the home economic stairs. Miss Noel was late, but she ran to take her place with pride and humility on the lowest rank of the school hierarchy. Meaning of or other meaning of resolution, the act of resolving or determining upon an action, cause of action, method, procedures, and etc. That's all. Thank you.
So, good morning everyone. So, before I start, I just want to ask you something related to my topic. So, how would you describe your father in one word? So, okay. So, my father was a man of hardworking, my hero and loving person. So, Today I am going to share with you guys a short poem entitled Through Ages and Ages Eternal. So this is written by Conrado B. Pedroche. So he is the one of the Filipino literary geniuses of the early 20th century. So rose to prominence at the era where only a few Filipino authors who wrote in the English language. So although he wrote poetry, it was in the short story category wherein he excelled. So it is clear, guys, that Conrado V. Pedroche is one of the Filipino geniuses during 20th century. So diri siya nagsikat sa panahon nga jutay pa lang ang mga Filipino English writer. So isa na diri ang ginsulat niya ang Through Ages and Ages Eternal. In the seed-struck roots beneath, in the rich darkness of the hills, in the trees grow stately and tall against the sky. And with the trees man built himself a house, and the house was good and clean. The breath of the trees was in it, and the warmth of the forest was its souls. A man said, "This is my house, this is my body's house, as also my soul's." And there he raised his children, and they too reared in their time sowed the love seeds under the white eternal suns of the earth in the far hills. In the valleys where the grass was sweet and cold and shining, and they too reared their children in their homes, and they said, "God, this is our hour till we die." And man sitting alone, thinking of this was happy, fulfilled at last. The cycle completed true endless, and life goes on and on and on, through arches of opulent eternities, orbited seeds and flowers and love. But now man sits alone and unhappy, for in the far hills and the plains and valleys, where once his children reared their children, and built their homes and sowed love seeds, under the white eternal suns of the earth, in the far valleys where once the brooks enriched the fields of grains, and the farmers, children of his children, stood against the sunrise and saw, in the bright visited distance of the future, the harvest, the nights of the full moons, and peace and love songs, and heard the tender sounds of pounding in the still nights. So the fat sheaves piled high over the land promises the plenty of freedom from want to hunger. He heard the laughter and saw the singing gold in the fulfillment of the triple mating of rain and sun and earth. In the far fields and valleys, no life but death, no longer singing gold but blood. And the cool sweet grass where once the winds stirred in song, he saw bodies of men who were his children, their hearts forever stilled in death. Man sees all his sitting thus in the silence, and shame he weeps, but light shines upon his bowed head. And he goes down his house, and walks over his field again. He bends down to contemplate a blade of grass, peeping from a crack in the dry earth. The grass does not die, he says, and through his tears he sees life arising, in meekness but triumphant from the ravaged cities of his souls. And man knows in his heart, suddenly, that after this there shall come beauty again, and love again, through ages and ages eternal. What a beautiful poem. So guys, let's move on to the questions. So first, what is the message of the poem Through Ages and Ages Eternal? Or what does the poem trying to convey? Okay, so the poem conveys or tell us about a person, life on earth. So it started out with how man was born. Then the following details are the continuous bloom of man's knowledge and perception. Next that were mentioned are the struggle and conflicts that man usually face in life. So this poem really show the reality of life. Even it can be difficult at times, but it's important to persevere. So, sa kalibutan ta, bisan ang kanuk ang kabudlay sa pamabuhi, nagahimakas gid nga para lang makasurvive sa mga difficulties. So far, na sa tawong or ara na sa aton ang mga ginatawag nga difficulties. So, it depends on how we take it and deal with it. So, there was a part wherein Pedroche said that men who were once united, so started to kill each other and develop conflicts with one another. So this part of the poem clearly reflects what is currently happening in our world today. So people kill each other for illogical reasons. Okay guys, please take note that the poem has 3 parts. So what is portrayed in each part? So the first part portrayed that how life has begun and a man started his family. So the second part, the problems, struggle, and challenges a man will encounter. So the third part, man can never give up as he sees hope and will continue to live on. So that's all for my topic. Thank you very much.